All right, this is a Pro Wrestling Illustrated podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle, back with my co-host Brian Solomon. How's it going, Brian?
Going great, Al. Happy to be here as always.
Yes, hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving and your family and everybody listening as well and watching. We're using some new technology here to do this on video. I hope this is recording. We just spent a long time making sure that it's recording, and I hate to be just kind of doing this into the abyss and nobody hears it because we've got a lot to talk about. Brian, coming off of back-to-back weeks of pretty major shows from AEW and WWE. I was lucky enough to be able to attend both, being here in the Northeast, AEW's Full Gear show in Newark, New Jersey, and Survivor Series in Boston on the busiest travel weekend of the year. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to stay home for Thanksgiving. My wife cooks for everybody. I voluntarily got in a car and drove to Boston essentially for a day and came back the next day, which was kind of nuts. But was totally worth it. I had a great time at Survivor Series. Want to talk all about it and also catch up on AEW. And some big picture stuff coming out of those shows, particularly as it pertains to leadership in WWE and AEW. And then later on, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm not sure you'll get this, but if you're listening to the audio podcast, I got a treat for you, and that is an interview with Brian Hebner of the Hebner family of referees. He's been on a campaign, Brian, to get his father and uncle, Dave, into the WWE Hall of Fame, which I think is has a lot of merit, and we talk about that and kind of WWE's historical sort of use of referees and how that's changed over the years, not necessarily for the better. Some of whether there's some lingering hard feelings and grudges there between the Hebners and WWE, particularly the McMahon family, and also just kind of looking back on Brian's career as a referee and the son and nephew of some very well-regarded referees. He even tells a story of watching his dad and his uncle on Main Event, on the most watched wrestling match, I think, still in American history.
Yeah.
So a fun chat that we had. Stay tuned for that. Right now, let me tell you about the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. I've got a few here. We've got the women's 150, and we are in ranking season. You could still get the PWI 500. And I think depending on when folks are listening to this, next week or later this week, I think December 8th is the date that we drop our February issue, which is going to be the Tag Team 100 list. And I don't know if you've seen the cover. I got a preview of the cover, Brian. It looks awesome.
Yes. No, I did see it. No spoilers, but yeah, great cover. Love it. Happy with the choices and all that stuff. Yep.
You pushed hard to make the Viking Raiders #1. You got your way.
That's right.
Yes. Let's say that. But another fun issue. And right after that, we're already getting working on the Achievement Awards, the year-end issue. So it is the busy season here at Pro Wrestling Illustrated. You don't want to miss it. Go to PWI-online.com. You could pre-order issues, you could order back issues, and of course you could subscribe and get the biggest savings off the cover price. One quick thing about the tag team issue, spoiler free, and you've been part of some of these conversations, Brian. I anticipate, people, there's controversy for every pick. I think the tag team one is going to have some people especially heated.
Of course. I mean, look, I'm not giving anything away, but that goes with any list we do, especially if, the only time that's not going to happen is if there's ever a time where there's a clear, absolute #1 pick. And I don't think that was the case this year. There were tough choices to be made, and so whenever that happens, whoever's on the other side of things is not going to be happy. So how can you avoid it? You just have to be confident in your choices, be able to explain and defend your choices, and move forward.
Yeah, and you talk about like a slam dunk. I thought if there was ever a slam dunk, it was Roman Reigns as the #1 for the 500, and there were still people who weren't happy.
Oh, let me tell you something. Yeah, there's people that are just in their silos, and I think Roman Reigns is the closest thing to us. Roman Reigns is like if we were saying it's 1987 and we're doing it, and people are arguing that it shouldn't be Hulk Hogan. Like it's that kind of thing. But I'll tell you what, I've been around a lot of AEW fans recently at shows and things, and it'll come up, especially if I say that I write for PWI, and they think it's there's a lot of people that think it's totally insane and ridiculous, and Roman Reigns is a clown, and he's a joke, and he hardly ever wrestles, and it should be John Moxley, and all this kind of thing. And so there's always going to be people that take issue no matter where you go with it.
Yeah, I think the challenge with the tag teams this year is that there were essentially, maybe it's a little bit of a spoiler, but not really a surprise. There were 2 Hulk Hogans this year in tag team wrestling, and you can only pick one. So that's about as much as I'll say. But I'll say it's a very good year for tag team wrestling.
Right. And I think like the thing with the tag team list is there was, without a question, there was more than one very possible choice where I think I would have even been able to, go, okay, yeah, for more than one. So it wasn't a clear-cut runaway like I thought that Reigns was. I thought that Roman Reigns was even more of a runaway than Kenny Omega was last year, because last year Roman Reigns was like that 1A, 1B in my mind, and I could have totally seen it going the other way possibly. But this time with Reigns alone, there was no one else in my mind even remotely close. And look, I'll be the one to say it. If you're taking a sober, unbiased view of the industry right now, and you don't think that Roman Reigns is the number one wrestler in the business, this is Brian Solomon saying this, I think you're out of your mind.
Yeah, I agree. And you can point to things that other wrestlers do better than him, whether it is technical wrestling or flying or cutting a promo. But in terms of the total package, it's absolutely Roman Reigns. And
he defines the era that we're in right now.
Yeah, we had a conversation some months back where it's been clear for a long time that he is the biggest star in wrestling, and even the biggest star in years. I mean, certainly since kind of the John Cena run. Now I think the question gets to, are we starting to talk, beyond that, right? I mean, not to be too hyperbolic, but when do you start getting into the all-time conversation, the Hall of Fame conversation? Roman was on the ballot this year, right, for the Observer Hall of Fame.
Yes, he was.
I don't expect he'll get in. Do you?
Well, Kenny Omega went in, so I mean, but the difference is, I think Kenny Omega has a lot more support among Observer readers, I would say, and voters. But it's that rule we've talked about where I think it's if you're 15 years pro, you're eligible. So Roman Reigns, I think, got into it. I think he just barely. Well, he got his developmental deal in.
He's only got 10 years in WWE now.
No, but if you include
proper,
right, if you include all of wrestling, like the developmental system, I think it becomes 12 or 13. That. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we're missing something, but it seems so quick for someone like that. At least Kenny Omega had a little bit of a longer career than Roman Reigns has had.
Yeah, and the reality is, you set aside Roman's, whatever it's been now, 2 years and change since his heel turn, since he came back at that SummerSlam in the pandemic with Paul Heyman, and he was on top for a number of years before that, but it was not working. It was a disaster. It was a flop, so I don't know that those years were, it put some more WrestleMania main events on his resume, and he beat the Undertaker at WrestleMania, and he can claim all this stuff, but it was not working, and it was sort of manufactured success. And it wasn't a dig at him, because I always thought he was super talented. It was just one of the great miscastings of all time with the role he was playing. And now in this right role, and it is still early on, even 2 years in, but it really does feel like we're watching something special. And maybe that's a good segue into talking about the Survivor Series, WWE's first attempt to put on War Games on a main show on its main roster. I loved it. I really did. We could pick apart certain things that didn't quite work, and whenever you're comparing to those classic historic War Games, I've been as much a fuddy-duddy as anybody, saying, well, you can't do blood, and why isn't there a roof on top of the cage and all that stuff, and there's not the submit or surrender. But I've come around and certainly understand why this version of War Games is maybe the right one for the time. And it's interesting because there were the two War Games matches that bookended the show. I enjoyed the women's one quite a bit. It was in some ways more in keeping with the classic War Games. And again, the challenge here is doing a match that was its reputation was of violence in sort of the PG era, no blood, nothing like that. That said, I think the women did a really good job of making it exciting and a lot of athleticism, a lot of big bumps, kind of the WWE style violent match, essentially what you see in Hell in a Cell and that kind of thing. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was whatever it was, 40 minutes, and it kind of flew by. Some sloppiness along the way. But I thought, well, they left room for the men to have an even more exciting, violent match. And I don't think they did. And this isn't at all a slight, but they really, it was two different formulas where the first War Games was driven on the action and the physicality and the excitement. And the second one was driven by story and a story that was told throughout the night and really for weeks, with that payoff. And I loved it. I can't say enough good things about it. I mean, wrestling certainly for me is the best when you are telling a real compelling story. And the lasting image for me is Jey Uso hugging Sami Zayn. It was just like, what a great culmination of everything they've been doing the last several weeks, and the place just went crazy. It was such a memorable, terrific moment. I thought it was masterful wrestling storytelling.
It is. The finish was very well done. It was terrific. Like you said, the whole build for it. It's so strange to me, though. It makes me wonder how they're going to play it out, because at this point, I mean, I'll come out and say it, the Bloodline are faces. I mean, yeah, they are full-on baby faces. So even though are they supposed to be heels? I don't really know. Based on who they're wrestling, I would say yes. So when they do this, when they play this out, and a lot of people speculating of Sami kind of like leaving the Bloodline or turning and all this kind of stuff, is Sami going to be the babyface in that scenario or not? I think that's kind of up in the air. I don't know. I feel like Roman Reigns has finally now reached that territory of the heel that people cheer for, which is what a journey he's been on. He went from the baby face that people boo to the heel that people cheer. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I thought the match was well done. My biggest issue with the War Games they do now, it's not I don't mind that they added pinfall to it or that there's no roof. I don't mind that so much. The blood, obviously, I think it would be better with blood. I think any cage match benefits from that. It's almost like, the cage is code for blood in a way. My bigger issue is how they've turned it into like a plunder match. Now it's become expected that everybody's going to bring weapons and props and things into the cage. That started in NXT, and it got to be a little too much for me, where it's like, where you have people chanting for tables in a cage match, I think it's kind of weird. Like, it's a weird thing. Like, we want tables and it's a cage match, but that's what they've been trained to expect. Like, I think they do the weapons and prop spots because it gives them a way to fill the match and spots to do, especially if you're not doing blood. Like, how much could you really do with 5 guys against 5 guys in a cage, like, for that long? So I understand why they do it. It's the biggest thing I've had trouble getting used to, but it didn't, but I still enjoyed the match. I enjoyed both of them, actually. I thought in some ways the women's one might have been even better, but just from a match perspective. But the show itself was a great show.
Yeah, I agree. It is funny that you're surrounded by, steel, metal, fencing, and what everybody's excited about is balsa wood tables.
Right. Like, okay.
Yeah. That said, it's like, we say here a lot, if it works, it works. And I know whatever it was, 16,000 people there at TD Garden wanted those tables popped for the chairs, popped for the kendo sticks. So I do think you have to be careful how much you go into the well. If they were going to do that in one match, maybe they have to sort of think about what they're going to do in the other, because it did become a little repetitive. And the other thing, whenever you bring out a table, this match isn't over until when you see a perfect table in the ring, leaning on a corner post or something, it's like, well, we're not going home until that table is broken.
Right.
All that said, I get that WWE has a formula, and again, you play to the audience that you have. The room, and I think they know the room, and it worked. It absolutely worked, and was fun. And I want to go into it deeper, but before even talking about sort of the matches, one thing is the production value. I mean, I was there in the building, and it just looks amazing. I mean, when early on you see that cage, and it's one of the reasons I drove to Boston, because it's one of the few wrestling experiences I haven't had, is seeing that double cage in person, the War Games cage. And you get there, and the time's ticking until the start of the show, and it's whatever it is, 7:59, and the air sirens start and the cage starts lowering, and I'm 10 years old, man. I'm losing my mind. And then they've got the War Pigs, and they got Ozzy.
That was great. That was really well done.
And I sort of feel this way every time I go to WrestleMania. It is really kind of breathtaking. Like, I don't know, and I'm not just talking wrestling, I'm talking in pro sports and anything. The production value is at such a high level. It is super impressive. And I went to a Full Gear a couple weeks ago, and it was a fine show, a good show. But it's these kind of things that shows you like the gulf that exists. And it's, again, not any dig on AEW. It's the fact that one company's got a 50-year head start or whatever it is. But WWE is untouchable when it comes to stuff like that.
Right. And I think, but what you said at the end there is very important to remember. They have such a head start. I mean, they have been, and I'm not even talking about the whole history of the company, even just the history of how long they have been really actively trying to work on TV production. Because I think that's a process that starts in the mid 80s, and you've still got 37 years that they've been developing. Because that's what it is. It's like you're building on what you did before. So anytime you do that, when you've had a head start, it's going to be, that much more advanced and better. I think the benefit of, it's good and it's bad, because it raises the standard for all of wrestling. So now it's so much harder for anyone else to compete, because it's no longer just enough to have good booking and good matches and good wrestlers. It's like the production is so important that it threatens to make everybody else look low rent, whereas in another era they might have been just fine. Like AEW is a good example. The benefit they have is tons of money to throw at everything, right? Limitless cash. But as you see from watching the show, it looks good. It's polished. It's a good, you can watch it, and it's a good looking show. It's nowhere near the production value of WWE, and we know it can't be for lack of money. It's other factors. It's talent, the people you have working for you. It's the continuity of doing this for years and years. It's, the whatever the philosophy of the company might be. And there's so many other things that go into it. And WWE has it over everybody in that area. No one would ever deny that. Not just the live TV production, but even just the whole thing of not the camera work. We have our issues with the Kevin Dunn short attention span stuff, but the editing of promo vignettes and packages and things to hype up matches. I mean, no one does that like they do. And even the stuff that people complain about with Kevin Dunn's like directing style and the moving cameras and everything, even if you may not like it, it still demonstrates that a lot of thought is being put into how we're going to shoot this. There's a lot of choices being made, a lot of very careful technical discussions, I'm sure, that are being had. And I would venture to say more so than in any other wrestling company, for sure.
Yeah, and I think some of what makes that possible is the same thing that sometimes turns people off about WWE, and it is that it is so corporate, that there are so many people working there, that there are hundreds of people in every department. I always tell the story of going to one of these fan access shows, and they have a whole setup. This was years ago now, for the Undertaker's streak, and they had a gravestone for each opponent that he beat. And I thought, it's somebody's job every year to go to like the gravestone manufacturer and get a CM Punk grave made this year. And it's just an item on a checklist that they got to do. And I thought that being in Boston and walking into the building, and I expected to some extent for WrestleManias, but they had the banners on the lampposts along the street outside the Garden. They had stickers on the sidewalks branded Survivor Series. The whole staircase leading into TD Garden was one big banner for Survivor. They had an ice sculpture, a Survivor Series ice sculpture that fans were taking pictures in front of. Over at Faneuil Hall, they set up a whole Survivor Series store with tons of like awesome merch. They did a deal with Sam Adams where they had Sam Adams branded Survivor Series shirts. So it's just so major league. I mean, it's hard to touch it. And, even little things like, and I know this is not the first year that they've done this. So this was in a warehouse somewhere, but the gap between the two rings, they had a custom steel plate made to bridge that gap to ensure that, there's no seam there. And the cage you remember the old War Games, and granted, this was 30 years ago. That thing looked like it was like about to fall apart at any moment. I mean, it was really, I remember the one that everybody loves, and I do too, which is the 92.
That's my favorite one. Yeah.
And Dangerous Alliance. And I was watching a clip of it the other day with Sting and Medusa on top of the cage. And this was years before even Undertaker and Shawn Michaels at the top of the Hell in a Cell. It was so novel seeing two people wrestling outside on top of the cage, just kind of chasing each other. And that thing looked like it was going to give way any second. So it really is so a major league and so impressive. But let's talk a little bit about the match. You touched on it. An excellent story told, a great payoff. But in wrestling, right, the question's always like, well, what is this building to? What is next? And that is one criticism I have heard, not just to this match, but just kind of the bloodline story in general is, in as much as the idea, they've been telling this great story with Sammy and all that, but at the end of the day, what's the match that you're building? What is the payoff? And I don't know if that's at WrestleMania. And it's hard to see what that is. And, they got 5 baby faces together. You could argue, at least some of them, your top baby faces in the company. And it almost felt like that WCW NWO stuff back in the day, where the NWO was just kind of mowing down WCW. They looked like, squash guys, and the crowd was so pro NWO and in this case pro Bloodline, that you wonder if it starts to be a problem, in as much as theoretically they're healed. So where do you expect this all goes?
Well, it's funny. WCW turned their own company heel, which was, I don't know if that's what they wanted to do, but that's what happened. And it hurt them in that WCW came off as lame and a joke.
And that felt a little bit like Drew McIntyre and Sheamus and those guys. Yeah.
But I don't see it becoming, it's not the issue that was, because that was like, you were damaging the brand of your company. That's what WCW was doing. WWE is not doing that with this. They might be hurting their pool of baby faces. That's possible, but it's not the widespread kind of damage. I think the Bloodline is the best thing that's happened to WWE in years.
Yeah.
And I think in a way, not knowing where it's going totally, sometimes that could be like, this is awful and they don't know what they're doing. But in this case, I actually think that's what they want you to think. Like, it's very calculated. They want you to go, oh my God, well, it could go this way. It could go that way. It might go this way. Like, they want you to be thinking that now. And I think the finish played into that. Like, will Sammy turn? If he does turn, is he going to be the heel? Is Roman going to be the heel? What's going to happen? Could Sammy possibly win the title? Could he be the one that beats Roman Reigns? What a bizarre ending.
I wanted to ask, we've spent months here talking about what's WrestleMania, and is it The Rock, which I'm sure is their first choice. Cody was so hot for so long, is Cody the guy that dethrones Roman Reigns? I half wonder if you do either of those matches, if The Rock gets booed and if Cody gets booed. And then now you have this new option. Is it crazy to think that they would do Roman Reigns versus Sami Zayn at WrestleMania?
Well, the rumors, you may have seen this, but the rumors that got out was the plan is basically Kevin Owens with Roman Reigns at the Rumble. And then I guess at some point, and then Roman wins that. Then Sami turns, and at least this is what I was reading. That then you get Sami and Roman at the February pay-per-view
with the Usos for the tag title.
No, Sami versus Roman 1-on-1.
Oh, right, that's the one that's in Montreal
in February in Montreal.
Right.
Then Owens and Sami challenging the Usos at WrestleMania, like they reunite and reconcile.
Yeah,
and they challenge and probably win the tag title at Mania.
That's fine. Yeah, but I do wonder if they can even get even more out of it.
Maybe they could. I feel like there's no way they're not going to do Rock if they have the chance to do it. Sami might be something that they do if they can't do that. But you got to remember too, with WrestleMania, their booking is on a whole other level where they're not just thinking of what's the best match or what's the angle and storyline that the fans are the most excited about that watch the show, which is Sami. They're also thinking this has got to be for even the WrestleMania is even for the non-wrestling fanatic audience. So that's why you do Rock and Cena and you do Logan Paul and these things that like people who maybe the only show they watch all year is WrestleMania, So in a situation like that, Sami might not be the best way to go, because then that's a situation of like, who is this guy that Roman Reigns is wrestling? Like for anybody that doesn't watch the show, I mean, and I think that they're trying to avoid that. So I feel like even Cody, from that perspective, would be a better choice, because then you have the AEW angle, you have the fact that casual fans might have more of an awareness. They would definitely know who his father was. Like there's a lot more of a mainstream appeal. Obviously, nothing's going to beat Rock and Roman in that department. But I think from a pure storyline perspective, that's the best angle you could do, would be Roman Reigns and Sami Zayn. It's beautiful. It's perfect. It's like, what it is? It's like the person that you never would have expected. It's almost like the end of Lord of the Rings or something. You have this incredible villain, bad guy that you've built up for years. And the last thing you expect to happen is for Gollum to fall into the pit with the ring. And, that's the last thing you expect from my Lord of the Rings, nerds out there. But it's the same kind of thing, like in a good way, though. Not like they pulled it out of a hat, but like, wow, I didn't see that coming. And that was fantastic.
Yeah. They've just stumbled onto this, and it's the proverbial lightning in a bottle. And I think you're right what you're saying, but I also think that the momentum continues to grow. So come WrestleMania time, are we talking about Sami where he's at now, or are we talking about Sami even on another level? I mean, because with every show, I think his profile, his popularity grows and grows. And look, he was the most over guy in the building in Boston, easily, and he is just over like Rover, as they say right now. I mean, and you can't underestimate. I think you're right about The Rock. If between Cody and Sami, I don't know that it's that clear anymore, especially with Cody being gone for a long time and now having to kind of rebuild, lost that momentum that he had coming right over AEW and having to rebuild it, and Sami just building over the last several months.
The difference I see with Rock, and this is so ironic, is of those three, if you look at these three possible matches, Cody Rhodes, Sami Zayn, The Rock, I think the one out of those three whereas the most likely scenario that Roman would actually win would be The Rock. I think with Cody, especially, Cody's got to win that match. And with Sami, I think it's more likely than not that he would win. But with The Rock, I think most likely The Rock would lose in that situation.
Yeah, yeah, but they just got something so special right now in the bloodline. It is it's just so much fun to watch. And even when the Raw or SmackDown feels like kind of a slog, and fast forward through it, when you see those guys come out, you got to stop and you got to watch. And we've been raving here about Sammy, and obviously Roman's great, but everybody. I mean, Solo, Heyman, both the Usos, they all just playing their role so well. Do you brought up before, because they're so popular, do you wonder if maybe WWE needs to just lean into it and just kind of officially make them baby faces, and it'd be a matter of putting them against heels, right? I mean, you find like that despicable,
very possible.
Yeah, and again, lean into it.
That is very possible. If you do that, you just got to kind of take a different tack. Like, I don't think then you want to put him with Cody, because that will hurt Cody very badly.
Yeah, I don't know who it would be even. I mean, but I'm thinking of like the smarmy.
In fact, if I were them right now, I'd be getting very nervous about putting him with Cody, because Cody was one of those people where you worked very hard to get away from what happened in AEW. You didn't want that to happen again.
A year ago, yeah.
And what happened with him and Seth like made him like $1 million, and you don't want to squander that. I feel like he's the kind of person where if you put him in there with Roman and the crowd goes for Roman, that's going to hurt him badly, and he's going to be headed back towards what was happening in AEW. So I would be afraid to put him in there right now.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree. I mean, I think you test the waters. I don't know if I don't even know what his availability is, how his rehab is coming along, but assuming he's ready for the Rumble, I think you put him in the Rumble, you see what the reaction is, and it might be calling an audible from there as far as where fans are at. After Survivor Series, they did this press conference. It was a lot of fun. I got to attend it, wore my Pro Wrestling Illustrated shirt, and Kevin was very happy. And I don't think in terms of like news, anything earth shattering came out of that press conference. But I did want to talk about Triple H, Paul Levesque, how impressed I am with him. I mean, I was sitting there, and I'm a UFC fan, so I'm used to this kind of setup where event goes off the air. Dana White goes backstage. He gives this many people were in the building. We sold this many tickets. So it was very much kind of coming from that mold, clearly. And Triple H went through all that. But I just think he is such a great spokesman for the company. And I was thinking, what if Vince McMahon was doing this press conference? First of all, he wouldn't. I mean, you wouldn't even think to do something like that.
He's too old school, which is such an ironic thing to say, right? But he is.
Right. But also, I was thinking of sort of like the public Vince McMahon for forever. And you think about like the Bob Costas interviews and just how terrible he came off. I mean, just a petulant child, unprofessional. And not only did I think Triple H was more in the vein of Dana White, but better than Dana White, because Dana's got some of that, Vince, too. And Triple H, just such a pro, so measured in his answers. And we've talked about it. I mean, clearly loves wrestling, is a wrestling fan. Also, so uniquely qualified because having been married into the McMahon family for all these years, also knows the political game, very savvy. His answers were measured. They were diplomatic. There was and I don't even know if this made it to TV. I think it did, but everybody got their question in, and there was a woman in the front row from a Latin television channel who didn't get her question in, and he said, "We're not going to wrap up until this young woman who's been waiting patiently, and they've put a lot of guys in front of her, and we haven't gotten her question until she gets her question in." And it was a question about bringing WWE to Latin America, and he gave the very diplomatic answer that we want to go everywhere and all that. And I just left it thinking, with such a feeling of confidence that the right guy is in the right job. So I can't say enough good things, but I'm just so impressed with the job he's done early on. And it even speaks to bringing War Games to WWE, which is something we know has been a priority for him. He's done it in NXT for a number of years. And I imagine Vince was, what's War Games? That's not ours.
I know that for a fact he was. I remember way back when they first bought all that stuff. It was floated. Triple H. I think Road Dogg talked about this on his podcast. Triple H was really pushing 20 years ago
Yeah.
I think that's how Elimination Chamber happened. He was pushing for War Games. He's like, let's do War Games. And Vince was like, what the hell is War Games? You know, like, what? I'm not going to do this. And another part of the fear was like, we have Hell in the Cell. That was a big reason. They were like, well, we can't do that. And then they come out with Elimination Chamber anyway. Yeah. So, but that's something that he has wanted to do for a very long time.
Yeah, and it's, you know, not to oversell it, but it really does feel like having one of us at the helm, kind of, because even when you understood, he talked about the reasoning behind doing a War Games and not doing, you know, the traditional tag teams elimination matches, and he even talked about, you know, some of the logic behind doing Money in the Bank on a certain time of the year. And we've talked about how it doesn't really make sense that Hell in the Cell is, you do it in October because that's the name of the pay-per-view, where it's something that should be more organic.
He said the same
agree.
Thing.
Yeah,
he said that.
Agree. Yeah, and he was right about, well, Money in the Bank, you can't challenge someone to Money in the Bank, so that is something that makes more sense as just a date on the calendar. So just whenever you know, he is pressed on one of these issues of wrestling and logic, it just seems like he has not necessarily the right answer. We could disagree, but a reasonable answer, which is so far removed what we got used to with Vince McMahon, which would just sort of so random. You know, one quick thing, not drag it on, but talking to Brian Hebner, which people will be able to listen to in a bit here. We talked about like how arbitrarily all of a sudden Vince McMahon said, let's not use any referees' names, you know. And again, it's one of these, just why? What, you know, what is the reasoning behind it? It makes no sense. And it is just such a breath of fresh air to have somebody at the helm who, and again, we could disagree on some of the specific decisions, but seems to be bringing the same logic and reason that you know, fans would.
Yes, it is the upside of having a fan in charge. Like, that could go really badly, it can go really well, and I think with Triple H it's the best case scenario, because he, even before he was a wrestler, he was a fan. And I think the ironic thing, from what I know about him, and I could be wrong here, I know he grew up in the Northeast, but I believe he was primarily like an NWA Crockett wrestling fan as in the 80s. I think that's really more where he gravitated towards. So it's ironic that someone like that is now running WWE, but he comes across really well, like you said. What's interesting to me is I try not to compare people and say, because people are people, everyone has their own vibe. Vince and Triple H could not be more different from each other in that way, but also Triple H and Tony Khan could not be more different from each other. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes Tony Khan demonstrates sort of like the negative aspect of having somebody who's too much of a fan who's running the company, whereas Triple H is more of the positive side of that. To me, that's my biased view. But
yeah, and I think Triple H, you know, the other thing he is a son-in-law, and so on top of like the politics of wrestling, there's the politics of family there, and I think he, you know, we've heard this about Vince McMahon for forever, that the way to get through to him, if you disagree with him, is to agree, suggest maybe a change to the idea. What if we do it this way? And then essentially let it be his idea. And, you know, you're just kind of reinforcing that. And I feel like even now, Triple H is doing a little bit of that. You know, there were some questions about why we didn't do War Games before. And again, very diplomatic. It wasn't, you know, well, the old guy just didn't believe in it, and you know, I told you so kind of thing.
Right. It's
very measured, very diplomatic, and but clearly we've talked about this a lot of other things. He is going his own way, and he is not what Vince McMahon, and you saw the Ariel Helwani interview. Clearly, you know, he's still I think giving Vince McMahon the respect that he feels he deserves, and maybe using him as a sounding board sometimes, but he clearly has no problem with, you know, going right where Vince would go left.
He does it in a very diplomatic way. He never badmouths Vince. He always shows respect. And even on occasion, he'll still even repeat some of the honestly kind of boneheaded sort of catchphrases and things that Vince would say, like the fact that, wrestling didn't exist before Vince McMahon, or he took it out of bingo halls and that kind of, like, he'll still repeat some of those mantras to show I'm still a Vince McMahon guy. This is me now. I'm running the company my way, but I'm not dumping on my predecessor,
But in terms of again, for being diplomatic, it's not lost on me that one of the first things he did when he took to that microphone at the press conference was give metrics, give numbers that this was the most successful Survivor Series ever, the biggest gate for that building, and they held a WrestleMania in that building years ago. So I absolutely think, whether he could say it or not, there's part of him that is saying, I told you so. War Games works. War Games would work.
Just the fact that he's been reversing so many things that Vince did very pointedly, like reversing, we're seeing one in progress right now with Regal, where it's like, all right, let's bring him back now. Let's come, he's just reversing things that so many people thought Vince was wrong to do in the first place.
Yeah, he's making right things went wrong. I mean, I think again, the Hebners talking to Brian, maybe counting on that being an opening here to mend some fences there, and even when Vince was still there, that was kind of Triple H's role. When you think about Bruno Sammartino and the Ultimate Warrior, he was the one who was out there kind of cleaning up the mess. It's just it gives you a real positive feeling about the immediate future of WWE. So let's talk a little bit about AEW. Their competitor, as I mentioned, I went to Full Gear a couple weeks ago. Wasn't able to stay for the press conference just because the show went so late. And I enjoyed the show. Again, we've been talking about how whether they wanted it or not, they've needed a new direction in part because of the whole mess with CM Punk. We've got MJF as world champion. I'd say the jury is still out. It looks like the numbers. We only have, he's been on TV once since then. He actually wasn't on TV right after winning the title. I like MJF. I understand certainly like putting the title on a homegrown guy, and especially after so many kind of like ex-WWE guys. I don't know that it's the solution. And again, I mean, I think it's kind of been one of the stories of 2022. They do their show, good show. WWE next week blows them out of the water with a bigger, I think it's better show. There's still absolutely things that AEW does better than WWE. But it does feel like all the momentum is on WWE's side right now. What do you think about Full Gear, and what do you think about MJF as champion?
I thought that Full Gear was a good show. I mean, I always feel like AEW seems to deliver on the pay-per-views more than anything. There's things I don't like on there, like I can't deal with those trios Bucks matches where that's me. That's my opinion. I just cannot. Where the referee is just like he might as well just take a stool and just sit in the corner for a half hour. Not my thing, but MJF I think is great. You know what the funny thing was? I thought that as far as matches goes, I think Tony Storm and Jamie Hayter is the best match on the show.
Really?
And I was not expecting that. Not because they're not very good, but it was one of those where like one of the things about AEW is because I think the talent get to kind of run the show a lot more and do whatever they feel like, not whatever they feel, but do more of what they just feel like doing. And there's not as many restrictions and things. That sometimes that can lead to, not so great results. And so in some of the matches, and sometimes then when you have people in there that really carry themselves well and know how to put together a great match, that it stands out so much. Like I remember when Cody was there, his matches would always stand out for that reason. And I feel like the Jamie Hayter and Tony Storm match, they just conducted themselves like wrestlers. They put together a really compelling match. There were a number of good matches on the show, though. I thought the main event was very good, especially because I feel like MJF really gets it more than most people over there. And I know like part of his gimmick, I guess, is that he's like a WWE guy who's stuck in AEW. I mean, that's almost like part of his gimmick. But there might actually be some truth to that gimmick because his whole angle and character is almost like partly a shoot. But I think it makes for compelling TV. I think he's really solid in the ring. He's a great promo. The thing with Regal, even though I think people saw it coming a mile away, sometimes there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes it's okay to do the thing that people see coming a mile away because it's entertaining and compelling. And in this case, it was. I think it's a great move to put the title on him. I think, I know they had it on Paige and he was another homegrown person. I feel like that didn't quite work out as well as maybe they wanted to, or I thought it would. But I think someone like MJF, he's got a lot of positive momentum. He's starting, he feels a little more buzzworthy than a lot of the other homegrown people they have, where he has the potential for more crossover appeal. I think it's a smart thing to do. I think I loved what he did at the press conference because I take issue with those AEW press scrums. And I think, part of the reason everything went so south with All Out is because of the way those things are run. And, wrestling is not UFC. Wrestling is not Major League Baseball. So the press conference, I don't think should be treated the same way. And when MJF came out and did what he did, it stood out more than anything that anyone's done other than CM Punk at the press conferences, because he just gets what his role is supposed to be. He's not going to go out there and be an a-hole and hit somebody with brass knuckles and win the title and run everybody down and then sit next to Tony Khan and go, oh, yeah, I think John and I worked really well together and he's a great performer. He knows not to do that. He's smart. And I think a lot of that is him. It's him. And so I think that's somebody and it's really good to give a lot of a strong push to and a big platform to.
Yeah, it's what makes him unique. It's also kind of one of the frustrating things in dealing with him. In my other job, I had an opportunity to interview him. and frankly, he's a tough guy to interview because he is always on, right?
But I will say and this isn't because I'm just talking to you, I thought the interview came off well. In fact, we quoted it and used part of it in the wrestling news. I thought, what it is, he's got a way of, and he did this too on that podcast he was on that they used a big clip from, Pardon My Take, I think it was called, where he can stay in character and still be interesting and compelling to listen to. Like, he's got enough of a creative mind that it's not a one-trick pony where it's just, a guy that's uncomfortable with his character. Like, when wrestlers used to go on the Arsenio Hall show or Regis and Kathy Lee and stuff, and they would just not have anything to say because Mr. Kurt Hennig just has to be Mr. Perfect for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, he knows how to keep it. At least I thought, maybe you didn't think so. I thought he still kept it interesting. It was a good read. I thought, even though he was totally in character, I thought it was compelling.
One little bit of behind the scenes insight was, and it was off the record, so I'll honor that. But we had a portion of the conversation where we talked on a subject matter that I don't think he was expecting, and we went into it briefly. And at the end of the interview, he asked if we could take that out. Because I think he was concerned. He had some political concerns about how it would come off. So he's not a dummy. And
you mean political within the business or like political, like politics?
Maybe a little both.
Wow.
I think he's very smart and mindful about what that character is and what he should and should not be saying. So yeah, but it does kind of create a unique situation. That's a tough guy to have at the as your standard bearer, right? I mean, like, he is always going to be on. The other question, this kind of similar to what the discussion we were just having about Bloodline, is that we saw in the weeks leading up to Full Gear is that there's at least a potential there for a really good baby face too. And there was some thought, do you lean into that and just go all in? And, they could use a really strong baby face. I mean, they've got Moxley, and Moxley's pretty over. But you do wonder, well, how well can MJF do the MJF act as a good guy?
I'm glad that they didn't go with it. I was really hoping that it would be one of those deals like The Rock in '98, what they did with him with the corporation. And that's kind of what it turned out to be, and I think part of it, and I think it was the same with The Rock, part of it, I think, was testing the waters to see, like, what would the reaction be? How would he be as this face? We're not going to do it right now, but if we want to do it, how would it play? I think it went well. I just don't think it's the time to do it now. It is not the time. I think his role needs to be first filled by somebody else before you do that. And that is not the case right now over there.
Yeah. The other thing that kind of parallels with the discussion we're just having about Bloodline is where is this going? And I think it's one of the issues that AEW has right now that really from its inception, there was always kind of, that thing to look forward to, whether it was this guy's rise or this guy coming in. And it does feel like to some extent they have shot all the bullets in their gun. I don't know what that next big signing would be, or if it even exists. And there are certainly all kinds of contenders who you could see elevated into that world title picture. And we haven't seen Bryan Danielson yet with the title and all that. But I don't know what there is to look forward to, right? I mean, what is that big thing in AEW that, just wait until we see X versus X, or this guy come in, or this guy win. And maybe it's there and I'm missing it. I mean, does that exist there right now?
Well, the problem is they squandered Wardlow because, and again, like, I know sometimes we go down this fantasy booking rabbit hole. I don't know how people feel about it when we do this, but I'm going to do it. They really squandered something that was special there. Because we have heard that he is one of those people that WWE has interest in. He would have been the no-brainer person now to put with MJF to say, hey, when we wrestled, I turned you into like a little stain on the mat. I powerbombed you 700 times and beat you beyond a shadow of a doubt. So how about you give me a shot at that title? But that doesn't even feel like the right thing to do now because Wardlow is nowhere.
Yeah.
But it would have been if they kept the momentum going from where he was when he first beat MJF. So I think that's part of the reason why it feels that way right now is that the booking is not as solid as what WWE is doing right now. It's more, and look, there's reasons for that, I'm sure. It feels like it's very chaotic over there now. It's probably hard to string together coherent television, at least a lot harder than it was. So that might be part of the problem. And we all know that whatever happened at Full Gear, that was supposed to be MJF beating CM Punk. I mean, that's what that was supposed to be. So that's the underlying disappointment under all of it.
Yeah. And it does go back to a lot of the differences between the two companies. I mean, I think the one thing that WWE also has on its side, as undisciplined as they've been about it over the years, is the two brands, right? So you are able to have top guys, top feuds separately. And, I think that's one thing that's in AEW it's missing. You've got a lot of guys who certainly could fit into that main event picture, but with essentially one brand, and I know they've got more than one show, there is one main event at any given time. So you've got MJF and Moxley on the top of, and the other thing is these quarterly pay-per-views compared to WWE is that they stay on this one program longer. So you can't just cycle to the next guy the next month. So you spend all this time building MJF and Moxley. And below that, you've got Jericho's program, which is going to be important. And you've got, the Bucks program, Kenny Omega's program, that's going to be important. And so a Wardlow, like you touched on, who seemed on the fast track, ends up whatever, like 5th from the top, 6th from the top, or whatever it is. It becomes an afterthought. And it's almost just a matter of math that it's just, there's so many wrestlers and storylines here. You can't feature everybody at the top.
There's also been this aversion that Tony has, and he's even said it, of doing big rematches. Like, it's not something he's a big fan of. And I think maybe that's a response to WWE because that's what they do. They'll do like the pay-per-view cycle where like, it's like the old thing they used to do at the Garden where you have like the challenger where to get his 3 main events, like that kind of thing. That's still what they do now, except pay-per-view. But sometimes that's the thing to do. Like, I still can't get over.
Get all the mileage out of it. Yeah.
People don't talk about this, but I mean, Kenny Omega and Daniel Bryan, that was like match of the year. Bryan Danielson, sorry, at the first Grand Slam. And it's like they do a half-hour draw. It feels like WrestleMania. The place is going nuts. And then never talk about it again. We're done. If that was WWE, that would be, those guys would be feuding up and down all over the place, having every kind of match, you know, and to just leave that alone was another mistake.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a weird parallel that I just thought of. Supermarkets, right? You weren't accounting on this one, right?
No.
Supermarkets have been a certain way for forever, right? And I feel like, and it's because I'm doing a lot more shopping these days. Like now there are some places that are kind of reinventing supermarkets. I don't know if you ever gone to, what's the place? Aldi's, right? So Aldi's, it's like,
no, my wife talks about that place. Yeah,
right. So it's like there's all these like rules about it. So there's like a long line, and they queue everybody up to different cashiers, and they pack your bag, but they don't pack your bags in your cart. They pack your bags in the cart in front of you, and they don't put it in bags. After you pay, you go to another area and you put your own stuff in bags. And the idea is maximize efficiency, speed things up, what have you, reinvent the wheel. And from my experience, it's like, well, this isn't really working. And whatever criticism you had about the way it worked before, when you try to reinvent it, you realize, well, they did it that way for a reason for a long time. And I do wonder, it's a long way of getting to, it does feel like, and I understand Tony Khan and AEW wanting to make their own way. And certainly, like, there's been criticisms of other promotions, Impact, TNA, over the years for just kind of doing low rent WWE, copying their formula, but not doing it as well. And so I appreciate AEW trying to go their own way. But in doing so, you realize, like, oh, well, this is why they did it that way, right? So I think at your point, it's like, yeah, that cycle that WWE does of doing a big match. Cody Rhodes, in the time he was in WWE before his injury, and I remember putting together his PWI 500 profile, he wrestled the same guy over and over and over again. So he really had one opponent in WWE because they did it on 3 different pay-per-views. But it worked, and we wouldn't have gotten that huge blow off in Hell in a Cell and that classic match with his bruised shoulder, all that, if they just moved on to the next thing.
I mean, there's got to be a middle ground. I mean, I understand maybe not doing it as much, maybe saying like, yeah, that's not going to be our policy to do these constant rematches, but to have an understanding of when it's warranted. And for a long time, there just seemed to be this feeling of like, nope, it doesn't matter how good this is. We're not doing a rematch. That's not what we do. People were hungry for more with that Omega and Danielson thing. I mean, you could feel it. They were like, all right, where's this going now? And it went nowhere.
Yeah. Again, I mean, it's also, I think, a product of they got so many guys that they might feel the need that we can't linger too much on anybody because there's a line forming of contenders. And they just have whatever it is now, the 4 pay-per-views a year. So, some of these stuff you just find out by doing it, because certainly there's been a lot of criticism over the years about WWE having too many pay-per-views and the glory days of having just 4 pay-per-views at WWE. But, there's pros and cons of each. Anyhow, we've been going a while now, and we covered a lot of ground. A fun time, for the end of the year here, and it's usually kind of a downtime for wrestling because you're in between the big shows, but it's fun and it feels fresh, it's so much, and it's crazy that the part that feels fresh is WWE, and not the company that is whatever 3 years old.
I was just talking to someone about that, like right now in this moment, they're the ones, and I would have to say if I had to pick my favorite show to watch, like I used to say it was Dynamite. For like a brief window, it was NWA Power. Right now, my favorite show to watch is SmackDown.
Same here.
And it just happens to be the best, in my opinion, consistently week to week major wrestling TV show on TV. So
yeah, real quick, but before we run, maybe cover some other small things from Survivor Series. This alleged heat with Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns about the slap.
yeah.
Any thoughts on that? I mean, it's a physical sport. This kind of stuff's gonna happen, but I guess I do sympathize with not knowing that much about what exactly happened, but I get being not happy about like what the hell was that?
No, I get it. My gut reaction at first, which is not my view, but my first reaction was, oh, come on, you're the heavyweight champion wrestler of the world, and you're complaining that someone slapped you too hard in the face and gave you a bruise. But then I'm thinking, all right, that's only because it got blown out into this public story. Like, that's the kind of thing that happens all the time behind the scenes and is completely legitimate. It's a gripe to have. You're working with somebody to say, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing in there? Like, I wasn't ready for that. You're trying to hurt me or what? Those kind of things should not be aired in public because they can make people look bad. It could be misinterpreted like Roman Reigns is a whiner. He's a complainer, especially for fans that are maybe not as clued in to hear the champion saying, oh, he hit me too hard is something that a fan is going to go, hey, what's up with this guy? What kind of a prima donna? But that's not the case at all. It's just that these things are legitimate, but they should just be kept behind closed doors. I think he was probably right to be upset. You also have to remember, too, the position he's in right now. He's the top dog. So, like, he knows the kind of power he has on the roster. So, like, I'll just say, like, if it was a mid-card guy that happened to, he's probably not going to feel free enough to openly in the locker room start yelling and cursing and complaining. You know what I mean? Roman knows that he is in a position where he can complain all he wants. In fact, if he wanted to, he could put Kevin Owens probably on the S list of like, hey, I don't want to work with this guy. I don't think he's doing that at all. But I think he's totally within his rights to have been upset if it went down the way he said, where it was unplanned and you hit me really hard. And I think I might have blown an eardrum.
Yeah.
Completely understandable that he'd be angry and upset about that.
Right. And we've seen that Roman is a guy who is careful about his health. Some of it comes from his, his health experiences, the leukemia and all that. But we saw him drop out of WrestleMania because he was concerned about his health, and good for him. And now we're getting into, this stretch where it's, WrestleMania is getting closer and closer. He might be having the biggest match of his career there. If he gets The Rock, you got to be careful. So yes. I get, if this wasn't planned, and it's little things like that, a slap that could do some real damage. As trivial as it sounds, you could blow out an eardrum, you can get a concussion. You see that Dana White's starting this slap league, this new extension of UFC. And if you ever see this stuff, it's on YouTube or TikTok all the time. It is just the stupidest, most violent, dangerous thing, I think, where you just kind of like stand there and you get slapped as hard as you can. So I get it. I get why, when I watch matches, that the strong style matches, and you see a lot of them in AEW where guys just slap the crap out of each other over again. It's off-putting,
Yes.
It's exciting, but even more so than like, the Gunther slaps on the chest. And I think you get the same kind of like, holy crap effect out of that. But you're not talking about somebody's head, somebody's face, somebody's ear. I get why, you might want to back off from those.
Completely.
Yeah, dangerous stuff. All right, didn't expect to go there, but that was a fun little diversion. Brian, thank you. So anything you want to plug? I know you've been teasing some news about another book. Is there anything to announce yet?
I wish I could officially announce it yet, but sometimes the holidays slow things down. So like I said before, there is an agreement with the publisher as to what my next wrestling book is going to be. It just hasn't been like signed yet and sealed and all that stuff. And so I don't quite want to say yet. It is a biography, and I will, as soon as I feel comfortable, I'll be saying it. It's a biography. It's with ECW Press again, like the Sheik book was. So I'm excited to get started on it, but I'm still in a holding pattern. I have a feeling probably after the holidays I'll know for sure.
All right, looking forward to it. And people obviously doing their holiday shopping. You can pick up Blood and Fire, the story of the original Sheik, on Amazon and anywhere else, I guess, right?
Yeah, Amazon is the easiest, obviously. I've seen some out in the wild in Barnes and Nobles,
Yeah.
but if you have one near you, they may have it because it's a recent book. It came out this year. Blood and Fire, Biography of the Sheik. I'm very hopeful. I have my fingers crossed that it gets nominated in the Observer Awards when they come out.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to. I think that's Brian Gewirtz's award to win, but I would at least like to be on the list. That would be fun, and I think that comes out probably in a few weeks.
All right, everybody go out and vote on that. Do people vote on those? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Any readers can vote. In fact, I don't even know how do they prove it? Well, I guess if you're on the subscriber list, I don't know. I'm not sure how it works, but I think if you're an Observer subscriber, you could definitely
get a campaign going here.
Yeah.
All right, Brian, thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. For those watching on video, we'll see you soon. Those listening on audio, let's hear right now from legendary referee in Impact Wrestling, WWE, lots of other places, and a member of a legendary referee family. Here is Brian Hebner. Well, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no worries, man.
Yeah. So I heard from Kevin about your lobbying efforts to get some of the Hebner family into the WWE Hall of Fame. We thought it was a worthwhile effort and wanted to talk to you a bit about it. So let and I'm not just saying this, but to me, this is a no-brainer, right? I mean, especially when you think about the WWE Hall of Fame, and it's sort of nebulous what the qualifications are. But they are generally sort of who are memorable, iconic characters and personalities from WWE's history, and certainly the Hebners are right up there. So is this something that you wanted for a while? Did it become especially important over the past year with your uncle's passing?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it just felt like it's time. So many years have gone by since they were no longer in the WWE, WWF, and to get to that age where it's to me, it's just time to be recognized. They like you said, they just did so many iconic things, and they were larger than life characters as far as referees go. And I just I can't understand. And what bothers me is I've seen so many people get into the Hall of Fame that shouldn't be into the Hall of Fame, that didn't even contribute to the wrestling business. And if they did, it was in a small, minute portion of it. You know what I mean? And I just think it's
world.
Say that again. Sorry.
The Drew Carries of the world, or
yeah. I mean, what the hell did he do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just sad that to me, that with all the years of the stuff that they've done, it isn't recognized, and I just can't understand it. It just is mind-boggling to me, and just actually makes me angry when I think about it not being done already.
Let's talk about what some of the reasons are why the Hebners aren't in the Hall of Fame, and really maybe some of it is the same reason why there are no referees in the Hall of Fame. Certainly under Vince McMahon for the last, and this wasn't always the case, but the last 10, 15 years, there was this clear desire for referees to be anonymous. I mean, to the point that you weren't to use their names or anything on TV. How much of it do you think is that, and how much of it is a grudge specifically with your family?
Well, first of all, the anonymous referee thing is just utterly ridiculous and stupid. They're just part of the show in that match as everybody else. Obviously, they're not the ones that are drawing people and drawing and selling tickets, but they're still part of that motion picture that's putting on in front of your TV. So to not mention the guy who's making the right call or the bad call or whatever it may be, it's just ridiculous to me, and it's just asinine. I'm just being 100% honest. I think that rule that Vincent employed was just utterly stupid and dumb and didn't make any sense. So that's that part. As far as holding a grudge, I mean, let's face it. I mean, there's many people that are in the Hall of Fame that totally screwed Vince McMahon over the years, but they're recognized, I would think, as far as how and what they contributed to the business. So, what grudge is big enough for the Hebners that's not big enough for people that have held up ransom and wasn't going to do a title defense, and and I don't want to use names, but I'm just saying, like, there's women that have done things there that are in the Hall of Fame. There's certain people there that were written off as far as being a part of the WWE universe, but they're still in there. You know what I mean? And I just don't think that whatever that grudge is big enough to not honor what they've actually done.
Now, obviously, the big thing that's changed over the last year is that Vince McMahon is no longer in power, at least not directly. There's all kinds of questions about how much influence maybe he wields behind the scenes. But we have seen referees going back to being named on TV, and it does seem like it's a little bit different under Paul Levesque, Triple H. So does that maybe create a window of opportunity here? I mean, do you have any sense of where Paul Levesque might stand on this?
I know this. I know that the relationship between my father and Triple H has always been very, very good. As far as my relationship as well has been always good. So, maybe this is something where Vince isn't involved in. If that's the problem, I don't know if it's Vince. I mean, one would assume. I mean, he's the one that made all the decisions at that point in time. So maybe it's something that, just like people being brought back to the company that were let go for one reason or another and are coming back now because they weren't a Vince guy, or a Vince girl. Now they're coming back because, quite frankly, there's other people that are all making decisions together and not just one man that sees his own vision and just, does what he wants to do. Let's cut this guy because I don't like the way he's not a cookie mold that I like, that kind of thing. And, you look at, many of these people that are back in WWE that are really doing some good things. I mean, and that just goes to show you that, you can't just base it on one man's opinion. And that's basically the way I see it. Whether this is a chance for the Hebners to get into the Hall of Fame, we'll see. And I just don't, once again, whether it's one man or whether it's a committee, I still can never figure it out.
Yeah. And obviously you've got some bias here because it is your family, but generally speaking, I mean, do you think that referees, whether it's the Hebners or not, should have been recognized in the Hall of Fame a long time ago? I mean, your family might be the most recognizable, but there are other really recognizable referees. We lost one earlier this year, right, in Tim White. And, I grew up and whether it was Joey Morella or Dick Grohl, these were personalities that fans were familiar with.
I do. I totally do. I see that this is definitely something. Sorry, man.
That's right.
But I totally do see that other referees should get in, and I've touched on that on my podcast, where Mike Chioda's, Joey Morello's, Nick Patrick's, Jimmy Corderas, those are guys that like you said earlier, Tim White. I mean, these are people that, in my opinion, have been marvelous to the business and contributed in high, just high levels. So yes, it's not just because my dad is my dad and that's why I think, and I'm holding that because he's my family. No, I just think that, I'm not stupid, not because he's my dad, but I mean, everybody else has seen what he done do. It's just, it shouldn't just be based upon the Hebner family. No, that's not what I mean at all.
Yeah. You mentioned Chioda, and I absolutely should have mentioned him. Of all the departures, the firing in recent years, that's one of the ones that sort of bummed me out the most because of the history there. I mean, Mike Chioda worked in that company for more, he was there in the 80s, obviously along with your dad and your uncle. But when you got that news of Mike Chioda of being fired, how did you take that? To me, it was like, how do you let this guy go?
Well, the thing is, you have to remember, okay, so also if you know who Tony Chimmel is, he's a long-time ring announcer. They both came into the business together. They were friends. And both of them were let go in a short period of time, from one to the other. And I can just tell you, under that Vince McMahon regime, there is no loyalty. There is no loyalty to anyone or anybody. And that's been very, very apparent through all the years. He doesn't care who you are, what you do. If you rub him the wrong way, you're gone. If you sneeze the wrong way or chew your food the wrong way, you're gone. There's no loyalty in that company. None. That's why I would never go back, because the fact that I'm not going to sell my soul to think that I have a job for life when, or at least till I'm too old to do it or whatever it may be, and think that they're going to take care of me. They're not. Not under Vince McMahon. They're not. There's no loyalty. None. They give you nothing back. So was I shocked? Yes. But was I really, really shocked and floored? Absolutely was not.
Yeah. You're still talking about it in present tense. But as we talked about, theoretically, he's gone. Do you question that he doesn't have influence there anymore? Or at least, do you still feel like he's kind of running things?
And I don't mean to be ugly when I say this at all. I don't know, and I really don't care. I just know that things are different. And like you said, the anonymous referee names, talent being brought back. If he's got to say so, obviously he's not the end-all, be-all. Yeah. But really, I mean, if he probably does have his hand in it because he's Vince McMahon and he's just that way. But no, to me, at the end of the day, I really don't care.
Yeah. Where is your father on this? He's got to be aware that you're doing this lobbying. Do you sense that this would mean a lot to him?
I think it would make the world to him. I really do. I think that this would be the ultimate respect that he would always be looking for, as far as, because you have to remember, he spent a lot of his life doing what he did in WWE, WWF. And to have that closure of just saying to him, whether he did or didn't do, or whatever the friction was as far as all that goes, whether he did or didn't do, whatever, just to have all that put behind him and just says, hey, Earl, we do appreciate what you and your twin brother and David did for this company, and we want to push you in the Hall of Fame, I think would make his life a complete life.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Dave Hebner, because, I'm a child of the 80s, and, I was familiar with Dave. Was the referee. He was the guy, and obviously we came to know your dad as the evil twin that was paid off the plastic surgery by the $1 Million Man. Did it bother you at all that Dave was, I don't want to say forgotten to history, but clearly your dad ended up with kind of the bigger reputation, the bigger legacy as a referee than Dave, who was such a instrumental part of so many big matches in the 80s?
I mean, I just think that the timing, this is the way it worked. I don't think it was anything other than that. I think that Michael David got banged up. He had some injuries that pushed him out of the business as far as being a referee goes. And then there was other roles that he had to take. And then, of course, they used my dad and the roles that they did. And just, it was just a matter of timing, because it wasn't that they made David go away. It wasn't like they said, we don't want you refereeing anymore. It was a matter of the injuries and all that piled up, and then he just couldn't simply do it anymore because of the knee issues he had. Mm-hmm. But I just think it was just a coincidence as far as the way the timing of that worked. I understand the question you're asking. I really respect it too. And I don't think that it was the way it's portrayed, as far as Earl Hebner comes in from the NWA, Crockett Promotions, and comes in there, does the twin deal, the evil twin deal, and then shoves David to the side, and then he becomes the star or the bigger of the two. I don't think it worked quite that way because of the fact of just timing as far as injuries go, and David just not being able to continue to be a referee.
It's interesting hearing you talk about injuries and the physicality of it, because I think a lot of fans would watch and say, what is so physical about being a referee? You stand there, you count to three, but certainly that's not the case. And what can you tell people? What is the truth about the physical demands of being a referee?
I'll tell you, this is a true story. When I first started refereeing on a full-time level, like really high level, I would come home and I would really, really, really be banged up. Now, I was always one of the ones that usually, I'm not all the time, but just usually was the one that took bumps. And my body was just banged up. And now I'm a guy that's in shape and goes to the gym and all that stuff. And that's all because of I was tired of being banged up. And so basically I took going to the gym and eating right seriously while I was in WWE, and it completely changed my whole life as far as being a referee, because I was able to withstand these beatings. And I don't want to say beatings. I guess that's probably not a correct word. These big, massive bumps from these big, massive men. where I'm not a big dude. You know what I mean? So they were taking their tolls. You know, you work 4 or 5 days in a row, and you're just taking the same bumps where they're, whether it be a choke slam every night for 4 days, 5 days, well, whether it be going to a table, whether it just be taking a spear, just on and on and on. So it just changed the way the perspective of refereeing was and went going forward, because I think a lot of guys started to notice, the things that I were doing and noticed that the change in me. And it was simply because I was tired of feeling like shit when I got home. And there's stuff now, even though I'm not active anymore, I'm, retired, there's things now that I still feel, that I can't take away and will never go away. Those are just things that happen. I mean, referees are not big guys. They're not, built to be bumped all around all the time. And guys that have long lives, and as far as, in this business, it's usually because they're not as physical. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I was a very, very, very physical referee. I really was.
Yeah, I guess you came in kind of at the beginning of that new era of referees, because when I think about referees from my childhood, they looked like your dad and your uncle. They didn't look like athletes. They were sometimes a lot older than them. When I think about some of the guys, they were like these little guys with gray hair. They didn't at all look like athletes. And I mean, did you feel like you came in at the tail end of that, where the expectations from the difference between a referee bump in 1988 and today, or even the last 10 years, is huge, right? I mean, your dad certainly wasn't going through a table 30 years ago.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
But no, I really feel like you're onto something there, and it's actually something I really never thought about. I'm thinking about it as you do it and say it. I really think that I was part of a movement, and whether I led it or not, I don't think matters. But, I think that I was part of a movement where the younger referees were really being pushed into the limelight, and really being pushed and being used, because I think that, the Earl Hebners and all that stuff, and the Kyotos were being a little phased out. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that in an ugly and nasty way. I'm saying I just think that the younger generation, I think they were looking for, because, let's face it, WWF back then always was looking for younger faces, and then not even that long ago, there was a rule, I think there was, that they weren't going to hire anybody that was 30 or older, or some kind of number. I don't remember if that to be exact, but, so I just think that, I was part of a movement where there were younger referees, and I think I really did start a movement where referees started to take notice and begin to get in shape.
Who becomes a referee? Because when you see a lot of the people who are the younger referees, I think there's a thought, and maybe it's true, that these are aspiring wrestlers, that maybe a scout or a promoter thought, well, you don't have exactly the right stuff to be a wrestler, but you could be a referee. Is that about accurate?
I think it is. Yes, I do, especially today. I really do. It's not the case for some companies I've worked for, but I think in WWE in particular, that is spot on. Definitely. I mean, you could tell that some of these guys are in great shape, and it's not because they are like, yeah, I'm going to be a referee, let me get in shape. This is because they were in shape to be a wrestler or trained to be one. And like you said, they found another niche.
Yeah. What's that? I don't know if that was the case with you. Did you just want to be a referee, or did you also think about wrestling?
I only wanted to be a wrestler when I was younger, and talked about it and acted like it and played around with it and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, when it was time for me to be a referee, that's what I knew I was going to be. I never wanted to be a wrestler. As far as
like, does it feel like the consolation prize? Like, well, it's not exactly what I want to do, but I'll take it if I could be part of this business, or what? Or is it just exciting to get a break?
No, there's no consolation prize in being a ref at a high level. No doubt at all. Like I said, when I was talking about being a wrestler, that was when I was like 8, 9 years old. You know what I mean? 10 years old. But by like 13, 14, I'm like, yes, I'm going to be a referee. I'm going to really be a good referee. I'm going to really try hard and train good and all that kind of stuff. So, what I'm saying is in my early years, I was thinking about being a wrestler. When I was just young and dumb and looking in the mirror thinking I was jacked and stuff. You know what I mean? So
yeah. What I wonder with referees, because if you're a fan of wrestling, right? The ultimate thing is to be ringside for the matches, and you guys got even a better seat than that, right? Being in the ring. So as a fan of wrestling, refereeing a match, can you also enjoy the match? Do you also enjoy the match as a spectator, or is there too much going on in terms of what your responsibility is that you can't enjoy it just as a fan?
I would say 90% of the time you cannot enjoy it as a fan, but there have been times where there's been let's just say a program between two guys, and it was so intense that I literally forgot that I had to do stuff and just kind of was just mesmerized. And it was the boys selling the story, and I was in the story, and I forgot that I needed to get out of the story and I needed to do a job. So I've been there before, and it was really wild. It was really wild. But not, most times, no. As you become more of a vet, you look past that. But as a younger guy, and Undertaker and Kane are doing an Inflamo match or whatever it was, or
Inferno match. Yeah,
Inferno. There you go.
Yeah.
I'm in the moment. I'm stuck. I'm stuck there for a minute, and it's like, wow, this is crazy. And they're face to face, and they're telling their stories and selling to the crowd, and I'm like, wow, this is some crazy shit right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like it's sort of like you got to pinch yourself, I imagine.
You do, yeah. That's what I'm saying. So it's just kind of nuts. But otherwise, you do your job. And you go back and watch it as a fan, and then you're good.
Yeah. When you have watched a match that you've refereed, is it completely different? Like, wow, I had no idea any of that was happening. It's got to be almost like an out of body experience. Like, there you are in the ring, you were part of it, but I imagine it looks a lot different when you're just watching it on the TV.
It does. And there's a lot of times where I'll go back and I'll look and I'll go, I don't even remember that happening. Yeah. Wow. What a great spot that was. Or I'll take a ref bump and I'll go back and watch it. And it's like, Jesus, he just took my freaking head off. That kind of stuff. But no, it's I really don't like going back watching myself, to be honest with you. But I had to do it because that's part of my training that I learned, that you have to go back and look at what you do so you can see some of the things you may or may not do right. So, I don't enjoy that, by the way. And just, like I said earlier, I have a podcast as well called Reffing It Up. And, I don't enjoy listening to it doing the editing. I really don't. I enjoy the podcast. I just don't enjoy listening to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I guess part of it is that to some extent, the referee is supposed to be kind of in the shadows. But how much of it, is that the case? What we talked about, sort of Vince McMahon's vision is completely anonymous, nameless, faceless official. And obviously there have been other extremes where referees could play a very, very big role. And when you think about Nick Patrick in WCW and in the mid 90s, what is that sweet spot? I mean, how much of a participant in a storyline, a character in the story, should a referee be at his best?
Well, you shouldn't be any part of it. You shouldn't be any part of it at all. You should be the deciding factor of who wins that feud, meaning you count the 1, 2, 3 for that victor, or whatever that case may be. Nowadays, I feel like refereeing has changed so much because of the fact that, A, in my opinion, they're not trained properly. B, they're trying to be the stars, which absolutely makes me sick when I sit around and watch today's wrestling. I just think that they're going overboard with movements and motions and selling what the guys are doing, and just trying to be and just noticed, and trying to be a part of that match that they shouldn't be. And I just, I don't understand how there are people that run a company that don't see this kind of stuff happening and it not be, ridiculed and gotten rid of, or at least explain to these guys, hey, you need to stop. You need to slow down. You need to, stop doing this and that and that. You're taking away from what the boys are doing, or you're taking away from the match. And that's just nowadays just a common theme, which just absolutely disgusts me, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, you've got this really unique perspective of kind of having one foot in one era and another foot in the other era. So yeah, I mean, I would think that your analysis would go a long way. Let me. I can't talk to Hebner and not bring up the twin referees. You brought it up before. As a kid, I guess I was 10 years old when that happened. Do you remember watching that on TV? And what was your reaction to seeing your dad and your uncle? And it's funny because at the time I was a kid, and then I grew up and I thought, like so many things of the 80s, thought that was such a corny, cheesy thing. And then I watched it over the last few years, and it totally holds up. I mean, it's terrific storytelling, and not cheesy at all. It was just perfectly done.
Well, and I've told this story before, and it's totally true that my dad had called me the day of the actual show. And as far as I knew, he was still with Crockett Promotions. And so it was one of those deals. What's that?
How old were you at the time?
You know what? I don't know. I really don't know. I think I was 14.
Okay.
Maybe, something like that. I know I wasn't driving, so, somewhere along there. And I just remember him calling me and him saying to me he wanted me to watch Saturday Night Main Event. And I'm like, to me, it was confusing because I was like, why would you want me to really watch Uncle David? Because I was a huge NWA fan because obviously my dad was in the NWA. I wasn't big into WWE or WWF at the time, but I was into Hogan and that kind of thing. And he was telling me the match and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll check it out. And I was a wrestling fan and my friends were wrestling fans. And we watched it anyway, and we were going to watch it. So we turned it on and we all sat around and watched it. And as the match began, I saw what I thought was David. And I'm like, man, David looks a little thinner than normal.
So even you couldn't spot your dad from your uncle.
Well, I mean, because they do look so much alike. And I never got them confused unless their backs were to me. Sometimes I would call David my dad. I'd be like, hey, Dad, that kind of stuff. But, I could always tell them apart. And as it kept going, I was like, this is not David. That's my dad. But I still was unsure. You know what I mean? I still was unsure as this thing was unfolding. And then finally, as it all unfolded, I was like, I knew it. But I was scared to say I knew it, because I wasn't completely 100% sure. But I just knew that wasn't my Uncle David. So anyway, as that happened, it was just really, really cool to me. I was in shock and awe, and was just beside myself, to be honest with you. The next day at school was a very, very, very interesting day for me.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, to this day, isn't that, I think, the biggest, the most watched wrestling match in American history or something? I mean, because that was prime time Friday night. It was some crazy numbers. And there's your dad and your uncle right in the middle of it. I mean, they really were kind of stars of the whole thing.
Kind of crazy.
Yeah. The other thing, obviously, that your dad is synonymous with 25 years ago, Montreal, and a lot of people back in the news because of the silver anniversary. How much of a sore spot is this still in your family? I know it's something that your dad took hard. Can you believe it's been 25 years?
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. Is it still kind of touchy in the household?
No. I mean, here's the thing. You have to remember, the reason why this all happened is because, and I just found this out on this week's episode of my podcast, I had Vince Russo on. And Vince Russo broke down this portion of the story, which is really, 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 really telling, where he was on a third-party call with Brett and Vince. Vince wanted the other Vince, so both Vinces, Russo and McMahon, were on the phone call with Brett. Vince McMahon pitched every idea he could, and Brett said no to every idea. Mm-hmm. Every idea. So what ended up happening that we all know about now was that they needed a way to figure out how to get the belt off of him because there was nothing that Brett was agreeing to. So to me, knowing what I know now after this week's episode, which, I hope my father hears this as well, is that he did what he had to do for the company to protect the title and protect the people in the back. So there's nothing to feel bad about. Now, Brett's his friend, and he felt like maybe, I think that's the portion of the whole thing where my dad would feel bad, is that he feels like he didn't do Brett right. But you know what? My dad didn't know this going in. This was not something that he knew all day. This is something that he found out maybe 10 minutes before the match. So this is something that he had to do and agree to because he wanted to protect the company and the people that he worked for. That's how that happened.
Yeah.
So do I feel bad and upset about it? No, I don't. I feel proud that my dad had the balls to stand up and do what he needed to do for the company he worked and loved.
Yeah, he really was just kind of caught up in something. And when you are an employee and your employer tells you to do something, I mean, everybody can kind of say that they would take this stand, but he had a job to do. Yeah, I get it. It's too bad that he became such a critical party to this infamous story when more than really anybody there, he was just doing his job. Yeah.
Well, let me just say this. What do you think would happen if he didn't do it?
He'd be out of work. Yeah.
He'd be fired. He'd be fired. You know what I mean? And was he really doing anything wrong? Think about it. Was he really doing anything wrong? He wasn't doing anything wrong at all. He was protecting what they couldn't get off, which was the title off of Brett. Brett was willing, in my opinion, that I've heard, was willing to do it the next night on Raw. But if he didn't do that, he would carry that belt to WCW, which would have been a huge, huge, big deal. And they couldn't have that happen. And this is why they had to do what they wanted to do.
Are there feelings of resentment toward Brett for holding any of this against your father? I mean, do you feel like he should know better? And certainly he's got the right to have hard feelings about what happened and how he was treated. But do you think it's wrong for him to take any of it out on your dad?
Well, you have to understand this as well. And then this has been something that I've been privy to, that I know, is that during that day, Brett felt something. And he asked my dad, was he going to do anything? And my dad said to him, no, I swear, my kids, I'm just going to do what we're doing, that kind of thing, because my dad had no idea what was going on. So Brett's anger towards my dad was legit because he felt like he had lied to him.
Right.
When my dad didn't lie to him when he asked him the question at the time he asked it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Again.
Right. So did Brett have reason to be angry? I think so, because he didn't know the story.
Yeah.
And once the story was told, of course, him and my dad have mended fences. And he understands it now. He understands it after 25 years or whatever it may be. I mean, I know they made up before now, like 25 years, but I know that, it took a while, a long time. And so my point to this is that I understand Brett's resentment. I understand Brett's anger, but he didn't understand the situation, just like my dad didn't when he told him what he told him.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. 25 years. And that blows my mind. It's been that long. And the other thing that blows my mind is hearing you say you're retired, because, always think of you as like the kids, right? The baby Hebner, and you packing it in. Is that something you've done by choice? Is this injuries, or what's this made you decide to close this chapter in your career?
No, I'm 100% totally fine. I could get in the ring today and I could work probably another 6, 7, 8, 10 years. It has nothing to do with that. It's just a matter of, I want to be healthy when I get out of this job. And I am. I have kids. I have done everything I think I can do. I don't want to go to WWE. I don't want to go to AEW. I don't want to go anywhere else. I wanted to retire at Impact Wrestling, which is where I went. I feel like I've laid out some good work and carried my name on proudly, and I think I've done fine doing it. And I just think that, when you have kids, I have 3 kids, and I've got a son that's in college at 19 years old, and I've got 2 twin daughters that are 14 years old. And my son, unfortunately, I missed a lot with him, a lot. And girls are a little different. He understood it. He was willing to accept it, and actually was really proud of me, and was, just really just over the top about the things I did. And he was able to watch and show his friends. Girls are different. They don't understand why their daddy's not there. So I just took time and thought about things, and just really, really said to myself, what else can I do? What's my Mount Rushmore? Well, that's already been done. What is there left? Except for maybe disappointment as far as not getting the contract you may want, or getting hurt to where you're messed up for life and you can't enjoy your time with your kids. And then I just thought that it was just the right time for me to actually settle down, be a good dad, take care of my kids, be there for them, and help run a family business, and just be a normal person that doesn't have to get on an aircraft and go stay in hotel rooms every night and miss all the birthdays and miss Christmas and miss all the things that every American wants to not miss, which is what I was doing for so long. So, and I have nothing but love for the business. I have no negativity at all. And that's another thing, politics are different nowadays. I don't want to play no games anymore. I haven't played any games, and I just don't want to, but I can see it going that way. I can see how people act and get treated. You know what? I just think that I want to go out when it's on my terms, and right now it's on my terms, and I'm very happy about my decision. I feel really good about it. I'm enjoying being at home, sleeping in my bed every night, driving my car. And that sounds as stupid as it is, but I enjoy driving my car and not a rental car. I enjoy laying my head on my pillow and not some other pillow that may have whatever all over it. I'm very happy with my decision at this point. What people ask all the time, would you ever consider going back? Right now, I'm going to sit here and say 100% no. Would that ever happen a year from now, 2 years from now? I don't know that. And I don't know where I'll be at in my life as far as those go, as years go by. But right now, I'm totally happy with my decision.
I think it's very honorable, and nobody could question any of that. Yeah, you've put in your time as much as anybody. It's interesting you talked about your Mount Rushmore, and people certainly, talk about that as far as wrestlers are concerned. What are those high points that every wrestler seeks in their career, headlining WrestleMania or winning the world title or whatever? People don't think about that, I imagine, that much from the perspective of a referee. What is it for a referee, and what was it for you? Is it, refereeing the main event of WrestleMania? Is that kind of as big as it gets?
Sure. I mean, does it get any bigger?
Yeah.
I mean, does Vince McMahon versus Hulk Hogan get any bigger?
Yeah. Yeah, being the third man in the ring there. Yeah, I was there in Seattle. Yeah.
I mean, along with Rowdy Piper. Taking a ref bump from Vince McMahon, even though it was a shitty one, but... and that's another story. He was supposed to throw me between the top and the middle rope, and he threw me over the top, so I wasn't quite prepared, so I got tangled all up. It was a mess. But otherwise, it was it was good. It's just, it kind of sucked. I wanted to take a really good bump for him, but he just didn't. He got carried away. He was full of adrenaline, which, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that.
Right, yeah.
I totally understand, but it's just, but other than that, I mean, no other referee can claim that.
Yeah.
And I'm just really proud of that. And I was really proud to have been chosen. It was just one of those moments that we just talked about it, where you're just in the middle of the ring and you're like, holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And certainly, you talk about the Hall of Fame for your uncle and your dad. Ideally, I mean, if you could write it your way, does the whole family go in? I mean, kind of like the Von Erichs went in, and are you part of that as well?
Well, you have to understand. I'm a totally different person than a lot of folks. Meaning, I don't carry ego with me. A lot of this business, there's a lot of ego, and you know that. I mean, there's a lot of ego carried. The only thing I wish is that, and I feel like I've done a good job of it, is that everyone liked me and everyone thought I was a cool guy and was an awesome referee. You know what? If it entails me going with the Hebner family, sure, I'll take it. I don't care, though, if it doesn't happen. If my Uncle David and Earl go to the Hall of Fame, awesome. And I'll be right there to clap and hug him and all that kind of thing. But it wouldn't make my career or break my career. Put it that way. I would actually rather, to be honest with you, going to the TNA Hall of Fame. That would mean more to me, to be honest with you.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's funny, like the because it's WWE, people associate you and your family with them, but you and your dad put in a long time in Impact, right? I mean,
yeah.
How many years? 15 years, maybe?
At least. I just feel like, that's my true home.
Yeah.
They were the ones that picked me up when I was down. They did it not only once, but twice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, just an incredible company to work for. And I just, owe everything to them, to me. Not that, WWE didn't do a lot for me, because golly, that'd be a stupid statement to say. But, and I have no hard feelings towards WWE. I just don't understand how things went. And it's so long now, I don't really care. I mean, I just believe that as far as my journey through WWE was all related to my dad and my uncle's issues that they had, and that just trickled down to me, which I knew it was going to happen. And it's all good. It's all good, man. It works out for the best, and when things happen for a reason that and you figure out why, then and I think that's why my love for Impact Wrestling is always going to be there. As far as I can remember and say and be alive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you're doing a noble thing, and it makes a lot of sense. There have been a lot of changes in WWE over the last year with under the Triple H regime, and history has shown if anybody can mend some of these fences, it's him. I mean, he's the guy who brought Bruno back in to the fold, and the Ultimate Warrior, and so many of these others that you felt like those bridges were burned. Certainly more than anything with your family. So, hopefully he'll be up for listening. Brian, thank you so much. You said you had a podcast. You want to promote it here? Where can people find it?
Sure. So you can find it on all your platforms, all your podcast platforms. Our show drops every Wednesday, and it's called Reffing It Up with Brian Hebner. And to give you a little background on it, we cover a wrestler. We go through their history. We go through everything they've achieved and accomplished, and then we break down a certain match and whatnot that I was involved in, and I kind of give you and enlighten you on the day leading up and the things leading up to that match and the things that we went over and talked about that were kind of really interesting and things like that. And it's just a really unique, not every day like, most wrestling podcasts are out there. We just have a unique way of spinning things and really making it interesting. And so it's doing very, very well, and I'm very happy with it. Obviously, I want it to keep growing. And like I said, it drops every Wednesday at 9:00 on all your podcast platforms. And it airs all week long until our next podcast drops on that next Wednesday.
It sounds awesome. Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot of original takes in wrestling, and that sounds entirely original. So, yeah, I'll definitely go and check it out, and I hope our listeners do too. Brian, thank you so much. This is a real pleasure. Best of luck. I absolutely hope to see at least your dad on that stage, if not you, and certainly memorializing your uncle as well. So best of luck. I appreciate it.
Hey, man, thank you so much for having me, man. I really do appreciate it. Appreciate all what you guys do, man.
All right, man. Happy holidays. Have a good one.
All right, you too.